In Baltimore, and week long watching the great Canadian game of hockey as the Maple Leafs and the Capitals get this series geared up. We'll be down at the Verizon Center on Friday night as well. But I'll be monitoring baseball, and I'll be monitoring the NBA, and the Raptors are involved. There's all sorts of stuff going on this week. But, you know, when I get a little offbeat story, you guys know I love to go find people that write about great stuff and then bring them on and say, what the heck were you thinking when you were writing this thing? This guy wrote a piece that's after near and dear to my heart, as many of you know. I love old, weird sports jerseys, hats, stuff. By the way, I'm in search of a Baltimore Bullets jersey. If anybody's got one, throw me one. I've been banging around on eBay looking for something. This guy wrote a piece on the opinion pages of the New York Times, this little publication, full of fake news, no doubt. It's huge, at nytimes.com, but he's also out on Twitter getting it done. He's a longtime sports designer of brands. I can't wait to have a conversation with him. I love this piece out of the New York Times this week, Why I Love Ugly Uniforms. He is Todd Radom, that's spelled R-A-D-O-M, and you can follow his journey, and tens of thousands do, out on Twitter at Todd Radom, that's R-A-D-O-M. First off, welcome in your virgin maiden voyage here at WNST. It is a pleasure to have you on, and anyone that loves the Houston Astros Sunburst jerseys of the early 80s is a guy I got to have on my radio program, Todd Radom. So first off, welcome in, man. Great to have you aboard.
Thank you so much, Nestor. Great to be here, and boy, this is a topic that's near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, so we've got a lot to talk about.
Well, it all started with the mustard yellow and the brown of the San Diego Padres, probably sometime in the late 70s for me, and those tight waistbands, and then I got my Eastwood Little League jersey that was like the Texas Rangers jerseys of that era, and there's just something really sexy about the late 70s because they're so ugly that they'll never not be cool to someone my age, and I was born in ’68, and I grew up on Kelly Leak and the Bad News Bears. So anything that brings me closer to like the white panel, ornithologically incorrect Oriole cartoon bird, that's my era, Todd. That's where I eat and breathe, man.
Well, we are coming from the same place here, Nestor, and to me, thinking back at it, I mean, I was born in '64, so we're rough contemporaries. But
we collected the same baseball cards, let's be honest.
Exactly.
I mean, we did,
Yeah, and I mean, our sports uniforms of that era reflect the times to a great extent. The weirdest decade of anybody's living memory, I would have to say. Politically, societally, fashion, and, sports uniforms really reflected that.
Drugs were involved, right? It was kind of like rock and roll, right?
Oh, without question.
I mean, no wonder the Pirates were all gassed up. Did you see the uniforms they had to wear?
Oh, that great photo, iconic photo of Dave Parker sitting in the dugout, smoking a cigarette, resplendent in his Bumblebee Pittsburgh Pirates uniform of the era. Absolutely.
Chris Sale sort of brought this back into the public fold last year, right? When he cut up the throwbacks from back in the era. And by the way, my favorite. Look, my cousin, toiled shortstop just a little bit for the Chicago White Sox back in the '50s and the '60s. Yeah. I love the baby blue Dickie Allen White Sox, but the white old school upper letter serif 1976, the softball uniforms as they're affectionately called. The 70s, I want to ask you about this because your background isn't doing this, right? Like, this isn't just some sort of weird passion for you. You develop brands. I mean, you're like a real artist when it comes to this stuff, right?
You're absolutely right. I do have a passion for all of this weird stuff, but I am a builder of brands, a guy who's a graphic artist. I have designed a Super Bowl logo. I've done various All-Star Game identity projects. I designed the Angels' current look back in 2002, and just dozens and dozens of more. And this is, somewhat appropriate to the conversation. I did, if you remember, the Cleveland Browns, a team that's known for a lot of things, but for our purposes, known for not really having a logo. I did a Bulldog logo for them probably 2002, 2003 or thereabouts, and that was my dog, my Bulldog Casey. And here's why it's relevant. I recall walking down the street with her one day. She's long gone at this point, but somebody looked at her and said, my goodness, she is so ugly, she's pretty. And, that's relevant to this conversation. Some of the uniforms of our youth were just so ugly that they were intrinsically pretty.
Well, and then there's like everywhere I go, I see Expo stuff lately. It's like when it's not cool anymore. I was in Houston for the Super Bowl, seeing all the old Oilers stuff. There's something about an extinct logo, bro. I was standing at 6th and K in front of the synagogue, walking into the Verizon Center for Game 1 on Thursday night, and a dude on a bike had a Quebec Nordiques jersey on, and it was for no reason. It didn't look like he was going to the game. It just looked like sort of a flying middle finger, to anyone with hockey to say, yeah, remember the Hartford Whalers and, that crazy little song they used to play up there? Absolutely. So it really is, it's amazing when these things become extinct, they become even sexier somehow, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And listen, to your point also, I was at a minor league game in Buffalo this past week, and there's a young guy, and of course, we're getting to the point where everybody's young, right? But he is wearing he's wearing a Montreal Expos cap and jersey. And this guy has no memories of what the Montreal Expos were, them having moved to the district in 2005, right? But, listen, it's a cool look. Nostalgia is a powerful thing. But I think there's a certain spontaneity about the looks of that era. And believe me, I understand this from a professional perspective. We deal with very, very careful focus groups. Things take, usually a sports identity rolls out. It takes something like a year and a half to come to fruition. There is a joy and, again, a spontaneity attached to some of these looks that, they weren't studied to death.
But you can always go backward and find something in the annals of most of these franchises that feels like a classic. Look, I woke up on Sunday morning watching the national news, not to think we're going to fix the world, but, amidst dropping bombs in North Korea and tweets in the middle of the night and all this, is a story about Chief Wahoo, right? And the problems in Cleveland politically with a logo that the fan base is very attached to, but is clearly highly offensive to the segment that it's supposed to sort of tongue-in-cheek but not to them represent. A lot of these logos take on a political association. Certainly what Dan Snyder's done down in Washington is, it's just a giant middle finger to anybody that thinks the word Redskins is offensive, right?
I was just going to say, you have a very, very prominent example of us just down the road from where you are in Baltimore. And yeah, part of it is tied up in, success or a lack of success. In the case of Daniel Snyder and the Redskins, this is a franchise that had, won multiple Super Bowls, a lot of heritage there, but what have you done for me lately? And it's not even lately because the Redskins, of course, have not been successful for quite some time. There's not a lot of goodwill attached to the team. And yes, the way that he has dealt with that is somewhat problematic.
But he could make a lot of money by calling them the Red Whatevers, right? Like literally could rebrand that thing, resell 1 trillion jerseys, retool the color. He could make money by changing the name, right? We did that here in Baltimore. Everyone bled for the Colts until the old man Irsay got on the phone with Art Modell and said he wanted $25 million to have the Colts back. And bro, I was on the radio at that time in the 90s. I've been doing this 25 years. I said that's sort of like, will we really want it back? It's like bringing the ex-girlfriend back. And the Ravens has served our community very, very well. And we had a dispute on the logo. And, David Modell went to, long stretches. And they changed all the markings 4 years in. The old flying bee was gone pretty quickly. And, when you reverse course on those things, it doesn't take long to sort of rev up the new engines. Hell, they've done it with an NBA franchise in Charlotte, right?
Yeah, that's a really weird example of that Charlotte franchise because I think we could get off the rails with it, but in the mind of the average fan, how do you handle records? Where is continuity? That kind of thing. But to steer it back to identity, I think in the case of the Redskins, they've got this really very saleable, very handsome, very ownable color palette. Nobody looks like the Redskins. And, rip the Band-Aid off. Personally, it's easy for me to say. It's interesting, too, because I did give a talk, and I do make the circuits talking about this stuff, but I gave a talk in Norfolk, Virginia, I would say middle of last year. And of course, Redskins came up, and this is my one man's opinion. Redskins is a pejorative term. It is, there are ways to deal with that. Rip the scab, get it off. I think in the case of the Indians, it's a little bit more complicated. And interestingly, I actually met the guy who created Chief Wahoo. He was 17 years old when he did that. He was working for, I believe it was his uncle's company in Cleveland, and he's still around. I met him probably 20 years ago at the All-Star game in 1997. There you go.
There you go. I was there that day, too.
There you go. Yeah. And but it's, listen, people, we all, Jerry Seinfeld famously said, right, players can come and go. We root for the laundry. And sometimes it's a hard thing to let go of.
Are you clearly a fan of the Houston Astros 1980 jerseys as the best jerseys ever made or the worst? I mean, where do you stand on that? Because you do love ugly uniforms, and ugly probably means sort of kind of that era. I think for guys our age, anything that came on a Topps bubblegum card or a Bowman card in the 50s, any of those old like Tigers, Yankees, old Dodgers, the things that never changed, those things really have never changed, where, the Celtics still kind of sort of look the same. So do the Lakers. There's certain teams that never sort of throw it away. And then there's teams like the Astros that are now wearing the Jimmy Wins, right, again, and the old Colt 45s again. What's old is new again. Look, the Orioles, still their best look is the Dempsey Lowenstein early 80s look. And when they bust that out, the city goes nuts for that here.
Yeah, I always say when, teams generally embark upon a rebrand for one of two reasons. Number one, it's to break this era of suck, right? And number two, it's when a new owner comes in and wants to impart their stink, and they have a huge investment and they want to do their thing. Some jobs, I always say, are complete teardowns, and some are renovations. I think in the case of the Astros, this is a team that has not yet won a World Series. They are, as I said in my New York Times op-ed piece, of the Sun Belt. They are not tied to a history of visual tradition like the Yankees or the Tigers or the Cardinals or even your Orioles are. So, it's okay for some teams. It's not for others. I am very reticent to a certain extent about calling something like the Astros the greatest uniform in the history of the sport, because it's wrong for the times of today. You would never do that today. I think it's perfect and of the era, but, what the Astros look like now is probably right. They're a mature franchise, and, they actually have a little bit of that rainbow look on their alternate uniforms, just on the sides. So they carry that DNA with them right up through 2017.
Same way Mike Scott did in '86 when they sort of took the sunbursts out of that thing. We are talking with Todd Radom about all things uniforms, ugly, attractive, old, new. You can follow his journey out at Todd Radom. That's RADOM out on Twitter. He wrote an op-ed this week for the New York Times. It's entitled "Why I Love Ugly Uniforms," and we're here discussing ugly uniforms. All right, so Todd, I'm reading a book this summer, and I'm about 50 pages into it. I'll get through it, and I got to kind of go slow with this. But it's on the Oakland A's, and I can't wait to get Jason Turbo on, who's the author of Dynastic, Bombastic, and Fantastic. The first team I ever hated, and again, I was born in '68. I'm a Baltimore guy. We're the Oakland A's of 1972, 73, 74. My dad hated Charlie Finley. My dad hated Reggie Jackson. And the next thing you know, Reggie's, out in right field, pissing off the Earl Weaver in 1976. So I'm reading about this. That really was the beginning of that fashion era, right? Like, this didn't begin with some art fart like yourself or some designer. This began with an insurance guy from the south side of Chicago trying to sell tickets and elephants and jackasses out in Oakland. And not just Reggie Jackson is jackass, by the way. with the Oakland A's, that's really where the whole thing kind of got off the rails from tradition and what can I do to piss off Bowie Kuhn this week, right?
Well, it actually goes back even further than that, because it goes back to Charlie Finley's having owned the Kansas City A's. In 1963, Charlie Finley said, he's a modern marketer. He is up against the Yankees and the fusty old Red Sox and Tom Yawkey and, the Tigers who were owned by and he broke from tradition with green and, green and gold uniforms. And remember, these were still on old-fashioned flannel at that time. So it was a revolution. He literally said color is everything. So these evolve, he changes these things year after year, understood how to market his franchise. They moved to Oakland in 1968, and he sells them as Fort Knox or California Gold, Kelly Green and Wedding Gown White, mix and match, had his players grow mustaches, and at the same time, they built a beast of a farm system. The much beloved Reggie, and along with Catfish Hunter and all of the, back to back to back, they came along at the right time. They came of age at the right time, and the optics perfectly fit the era.
And the white shoes that Billy White Shoes Johnson later addressed as well. Where is all this going, right? I mean, this is where I would leave it with you, and I'll call you every couple months and sit here and argue about ugly uniforms because I've been doing that on the radio for 25 years as well. But for the NBA, and this is one of my problems with the NBA, and this makes me non-millennial, this makes me an old white guy, the whole deal. But I literally, even playoff week, put the games on, and there's no association with a lot of these teams and brands. I mean, for me, when the Houston Rockets win with Akeem the Dream, they should never change their jerseys. That's what they should look like forever. I find a lot of the NBA teams, much more so than baseball or football or even hockey, where, a Columbus or a Minnesota Wild might be sort of a new palette, or, you're trying to figure out what the Arizona team's wearing this year or whatever. But for the most part, when you watch hockey, baseball, or football, it's never hard to figure out which team is the Bills or which team is, the Seahawks or whatever they're wearing. But boy, the NBA, it looks like they're out there in pajamas half the nights, and I really, there is a level of confusion for me, and I've been watching the NBA since, Bill Walton, for crying out loud, where I think the NBA's done a really poor job of that part of it because it's not identifiable to me.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think it's the Oregon Duckization, if that's a word, of the sport. Listen, baseball has 162 games. You can have a mix of uniforms. If you're the NBA and you're playing half as many, listen, I think I totally agree, and I think you can only look to the champions of last year, the Cleveland Cavaliers. Wine and gold, a very ownable, right? It's like the Redskins, very ownable palette in the league. Well, they come out there in navy blue uniforms, and for that epic Game 7 where LeBron lifts the entire city of Cleveland on his shoulders, they are out there in black. So there's brand confusion, and that can be a bad thing. Too much of a good thing is too much. It's like, you can't eat steak for dinner every night.
Yeah, I mean, I just that's the part that makes me an old fuddy-duddy, and I don't even know what to say about it other than, pick a color, pick a palette and wear it, and these goofy, fruit-looking uniforms that the NFL pulls out on these Thursday night, these color rush. I mean, our guys are running around in mustard pants, and, sometimes they look like a banana, sometimes they look like a pickle, literally, sometimes they look like a blob of ketchup. I mean, it really is bizarre, and it smacks of like sort of WFL or like something out of the Vince McMahon playbook sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we can all get cynical because all of this is marketing driven. And again, I'm right down there in the trenches, and I have a very, good observation on how that sausage gets made, if you want to look at it like that. But listen, the truth probably lies somewhere in between the Yankees, who have two uniforms, a home and a road, and that's it. And, maybe that extreme example. And maybe a good example is actually your hometown Orioles, because they are black and orange. They've been black and orange since day one in 1954, so there's a lot of heritage there. I close my eyes as a New York guy, and, I've had the honor of talking with Brooks Robinson about these uniforms, right? I close my eyes, I see Brooks in that uniform, I see Cal Ripken, I see the Nats, I see John Lowenstein. The Orioles look like the Orioles. They have, kind of stepped in different directions at times, but pretty much fundamentally they are who they are. And they have, they have a few uniforms that fit the bill, but it's not too many. Well,
the Orioles got into it in 70-71 as well. I mean, there's that famous picture of Cuellar, Dobson, Palmer, McNally. You know what I'm talking about, where they look literally like they came out of a pumpkin patch, Todd Radom, right?
Orange pants. Nobody looks good in orange pants now. I mean,
Not
I don't
even the
care
Browns.
who you are. Yeah, I mean, that's just a bad look. But I'll tell you this, and again, we talk about nostalgia. It's such a powerful thing. I do remember seeing the 1979 World Series and the yellow and black Pirates that we referenced earlier.
Todd, I don't know what you're talking about. I've erased every memory of the 1970s.
No,
I have no memory of We Are Family, no memory of Omar Moreno's wife, nothing. Phil Garner, Blyleven, Candelaire, we've forgotten all, especially Kent Colvey. I mean, I've been trying to forget about him for 40 years now, by the way.
Toothpick. But let's get back to the Orioles, who looked, they looked great in those orange tops, not orange bottoms, but orange tops. It just, suited them perfectly. And like you said, when they reverted back to the smiling bird and the white panels, I think it's important to point out that everything old isn't necessarily good, that you could pick pieces of who you've been and maybe kick it forward into the 21st century. This is important to do. But the Orioles, I think, did it right, and they responded to the public at a time that they were coming back up. And listen, Baltimore, you know it better than I. This is a baseball town that was a sleeping giant for so many years. And they kind of like, the ornithologically correct bird just never, I don't know. It just didn't look right.
That was the 50s bird that came back, and they were no good in the 50s. People forgot that part of it. Todd, last thing for you, and if I out you on this Cleveland Browns thing, they're going to blame you for the Bulldog, which, I mean, they're never going to get it fixed. I mean, at least they can do is look good, right? I mean, this goofy thing they're doing now with the Cleveland thing on it, I don't know what the Browns can do. They are still logoless. And look, when the franchise was going to move here, the first thing I petitioned for on the radio was like, look, it's nice that we're going to have a team back, and can we at least get a logo? Please, Mr. Modell, can we get a logo? The Browns are never going to get it right, though, are they?
No, I mean, they are the Browns, seemingly, after all, right? So you look good, play good, your optics fit your culture, this kind of a thing. But I've already seen rumors, this is public stuff, that they're already thinking about abandoning those really kind of, not very good-looking uniforms that they adopted several years ago. Now, listen, whether or not they actually go to an actual logo, we can have a debate about whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent. But the Victoria's Secret pink on the back of, it's similar to that. It's just having your name in such a prominent place is such it's kind of a bad look for a classic franchise, win, lose, or whatever.
Well, it's good enough for Jim Brown. They should go back to that. That's what I think. Hey, man, I'll stay in touch with you. I really did enjoy your piece out at the New York Times. We'll be following you out on Twitter at Todd Radom, as well as at ToddRadom.com. That's RADOM. He's a native New Yorker, creating the world's most visible sports brands for 25 years. He's done design, brand consultation, and writing for the New York Times. You were a great guest, man, and every time I see a throwback, I will remember to call you. Anytime I'm ready to argue about fashion, you're number one on the list, Todd. That's it.
Let's do it, Nestor. This is a great conversation, and we'll have to do it again for sure.
I'm going to wear my Bad News Bears jersey next time we do it, my Kelly Leak.
Awesome.
See you later. There he goes. Todd Radom out at NewYorkTimes.com. The piece is Why I Love Ugly Uniforms. You can Google that and find that out on his Twitter as well. You can find me in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world that you are. I'm in Toronto all week watching hockey, a little baseball, a little basketball, doing Toronto-type stuff, the Hockey Hall of Fame, trying to have a little bit of fun north of the border. Get the Caps back for Game 5 on Friday night as well. Wizards, the NFL Draft, the schedule's coming out. We're taking you to London. We have our trip on sale. We're waiting on Green Bay, Nashville, Oakland, and Minnesota. We'll be getting all of those trips out to you. Hope you join us in our 25th anniversary of doing sports radio here this summer. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.